In the dense wilderness of an alien planet, Laura moved carefully through the thick underbrush. She was a biologist, part of a small research team sent to study the strange ecosystem of this world. The air smelled earthy and unfamiliar, filled with scents that hinted at life forms unlike anything on Earth. Her boots sank slightly into the soft ground as she walked, her hands clutching a small container for collecting samples. The forest around her was alive with sounds, buzzing insects, rustling leaves, and distant calls of creatures she had yet to see. But then, something unusual caught her attention. A low growl, followed by sharp yelps, echoed through the trees. It sounded like animals fighting, but not just any animals. These noises were deeper, more guttural, and carried a sense of danger that made her skin prickle. Curiosity pulled her forward despite the warning bells in her mind. She crept closer, stepping lightly to avoid making noise. As she rounded a cluster of rocks, she froze. Two young predator cubs were locked in combat, their sleek, scaled bodies glistening in the light of the twin suns overhead. They were smaller than adult predators Laura had seen in videos taken by drones, but they were still formidable. Their claws gleamed like polished steel, and their teeth looked razor-sharp, designed for tearing flesh apart. Laura's heart raced as she watched them wrestle. One cub managed to pin the other down, its jaws snapping dangerously close to its sibling's throat. The pinned cub let out a high-pitched whine, thrashing desperately to break free. Laura felt a surge of instinctive panic. Something inside her screamed that she couldn't just stand there and watch. Without fully understanding why, she stepped forward, breaking the cover of the bushes. "Stop," she said firmly, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. The cubs paused mid-struggle, their golden eyes locking onto her. For a moment everything was still. Then the larger cub released its grip and turned to face her, its posture tense and wary. Laura held her breath, knowing how fragile her position was. One wrong move could turn her from observer to prey. Despite the fear clawing at her chest, Laura didn't back away. Instead, she knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. She reached out her hand, placing it gently between the two cubs. Her touch was firm but non-threatening, separating them without causing alarm. The cubs stilled, confused by this strange intruder who dared interfere in their fight. Laura exhaled softly, realizing these weren't fully grown predators. They were juveniles, still learning the rules of dominance and survival. And somehow, her presence had disrupted their natural hierarchy. The larger cub tilted its head, studying her with an almost human-like curiosity. Its sibling, though clearly shaken, also seemed to relax slightly, no longer trying to flee. For several long moments, Laura stayed where she was, her hand resting between them. She could feel the warmth radiating off their bodies, a reminder of how powerful they truly were. Yet, instead of attacking her, the cubs allowed her to remain, their earlier aggression replaced by cautious interest. It was surreal, almost dreamlike, and Laura knew she had stumbled into something extraordinary. To her, someone else was watching. A tracker hired by the research team had been following her at a distance to ensure her safety. He had seen everything, the cubs fighting, Laura stepping in, and now, the bizarre truce that had formed because of her intervention. His grip tightened on his weapon as he debated whether to step in or let her handle the situation. In the end, he chose to wait, trusting her instincts even as his own nerves threatened to get the better of him. As the cubs settled further, Laura extended her hand toward the smaller one, palm open and non-threatening. To everyone's astonishment, including, the cub sniffed her fingers cautiously before nudging them gently. Its sibling watched warily but didn't object. It was a moment of connection, fleeting but undeniable, between a human and creatures that should have seen her only as a threat. Shifted uneasily in the shadows, his eyes scanning the surrounding forest. Something about this scene felt wrong, too quiet. That's when he noticed movement deeper in the woods. A massive shadow shifted among the trees, belonging to none other than the alpha predator. This creature dwarfed the cubs, its muscular frame radiating power. Its blood ran cold. If the alpha decided Laura posed a threat, there would be no escape. But for now, all was calm. Laura remained focused on the cubs, unaware of the looming presence nearby. She had no idea that her simple act of kindness had set events in motion that would change everything, for her, for the predators, and perhaps even for the future of humanity's understanding of this alien. Yet, stood hidden among the shadows of the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. He had been following Laura for some time now, keeping a safe distance to ensure her safety while giving her space to do her work. But what he saw next left him stunned and unsure of what to do. When Laura stepped into the clearing where the two cubs were fighting, his first instinct was to rush forward and pull her back. These creatures were apex predators even as juveniles. Their sharp claws and teeth could tear through flesh with ease. Yet instead of retreating or panicking, Laura did something unexpected. She stepped between them. Her voice rang out clearly, firm but calm, cutting through the growls and snarls like a blade slicing through tension. Gripped his weapon tightly, his knuckles turning white. He wanted to intervene, to shout at Laura to get away from the danger she was putting herself in, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way she moved, slowly, deliberately, or maybe it was the strange stillness that fell over the scene when she placed her hand between the cubs. Whatever it was, found himself holding his breath, unable to look away. The cubs stilled, their golden eyes fixed on Laura as if trying to understand who or what she was. For a moment, thought they might lunge at her, driven by instinct to attack anything unfamiliar. But then something remarkable happened. Instead of attacking, the larger cub pulled back slightly, its head tilting curiously. The smaller one followed suit, its earlier fear replaced by cautious interest. Laura didn't stop there. She knelt slowly, her movements careful and controlled. She extended her hand toward the smaller cub, palm open and non-threatening. Watched in disbelief as the cub sniffed her fingers cautiously before nudging them gently. Its sibling watched warily but didn't object. It was as if Laura had somehow earned their trust, or at least their curiosity, in just a few short moments. Shook his head, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Nothing about this made sense. Apex predators weren't supposed to behave this way. They were driven by instinct, ruled by hunger and survival. Yet here they were, responding to a human as if she were part of their pack. Was it because she treated them with respect? Because she didn't show fear? Couldn't be sure, but one thing was certain. Laura had done something extraordinary. Still's relief was short-lived. His eyes scanned the surrounding forest, searching for any sign of movement. Something about this scene felt too quiet, too perfect. That's when he saw it, a massive shadow shifting among the trees. The alpha predator emerged silently, its golden eyes locking onto Laura immediately. Every muscle in its body coiled with potential energy, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Its blood ran cold. This was the creature all the researchers had been warned about, the one responsible for driving entire teams off the planet during previous expeditions. It was bigger than the cubs, its sleek, scaled body shimmering under the twin suns. Its claws looked like daggers, and its teeth gleamed with a predatory sharpness that sent chills down spine. For a tense moment, nothing happened. The alpha stood perfectly still, its gaze fixed on Laura, tightened his grip on his weapon, ready to act if necessary. But he hesitated, knowing that firing would only escalate the situation. If the alpha decided Laura posed a threat, there would be no escape, not for her and probably not for him either. Laura seemed unaware of the alpha's presence. She remained focused on the cubs, her posture unwavering despite the obvious danger. Slowly, she rose to her feet, her hands still visible and empty. The alpha tilted its head, mirroring the curiosity shown earlier by the cubs. Then it took a step forward, closing the gap between them. His heart raced. He wanted to shout, to tell Laura to run, but he knew better. Any sudden movement might provoke an attack. All he could do was watch helplessly as the alpha leaned closer, inspecting Laura as if assessing her worthiness. Its hot breath washed over her face, carrying the scent of raw meat and untamed wilderness. Laura swallowed hard, resisting the urge to flinch. Then unexpectedly the alpha lowered itself slightly, bowing its head ever so subtly. It was a gesture of acknowledgement, not submission, but respect. Laura exhaled, realizing she had somehow earned the creature's trust, or at least its interest. Let out a shaky breath, lowering his weapon slightly. Whatever had just happened, it was clear that the Alpha wasn't planning to attack. Instead, the Alpha turned its attention to the Cubs, letting out a low rumble that seemed to carry authority. The Cubs responded instantly, moving closer to Laura and nudging her gently. It was as if the Alpha was introducing them to her, entrusting her with their care, or perhaps testing her further. Either way, Laura stayed calm, allowing the Cubs to interact with her without showing fear. Finally stepped into view, his weapon raised but not aimed directly at the Alpha. He kept his distance, positioning himself as a secondary line of defense without escalating the situation. "Laura," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper, "don't make any sudden moves." She nodded almost imperceptibly, maintaining eye contact with the Alpha. Her hands remained steady, her breathing slow and controlled. The Alpha studied her for a few more moments before stepping back, its massive frame disappearing into the shadows of the forest as silently as it had come. Exhaled deeply, lowering his weapon completely. What just happened?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. Laura shook her head, her expression a mix of awe and confusion. "I don't know," she admitted, "but I think they understood me." Didn't respond immediately. He glanced at the Cubs, who were now lying quietly beside Laura, their earlier aggression forgotten. Whatever had transpired, it was clear that something profound had occurred. Laura had crossed a boundary that no one else on the team had dared to approach, forming a connection with creatures that should have seen her only as prey. As they began the long walk back to camp, couldn't shake the image of the Alpha's piercing gaze, or the realization that Laura had done something no one else could have. She had faced down apex predators and walked away unharmed, earning their respect in a way that logic. And though neither of them spoke about it, both knew that this encounter would change everything. For Laura, for the research team, and perhaps even for humanity's understanding of this alien world. Back at the research camp, Laura sat quietly in her tent, replaying the events of the day over and over in her mind. The encounter with the Cubs and later the Alpha Predator had left her shaken but also deeply intrigued. She couldn't stop thinking about the way the creatures had responded to her, their golden eyes filled with something that felt almost like recognition. It wasn't just instinct or reflex, it was something more. When she finally emerged from her tent, was waiting for her. He had already told the rest of the team about what he had witnessed, though his description was brief and cautious. None of them seemed to fully grasp the gravity of what had happened. To most of them, it was just another strange story from an alien planet, a tale they could dismiss as coincidence or exaggeration. But Laura knew better. She gathered the team in the main tent, determined to explain everything in detail. "I know how this sounds," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of her words. "But those Cubs, they're intelligent. They understood me. And the Alpha, it didn't attack because it recognized that I wasn't a threat." Her colleagues exchanged skeptical glances. One of them, a man named Steve, leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "Laura, we've studied these creatures for months. Everything we've seen points to them being purely instinct-driven hunters. What makes you think they're capable of understanding us?" Laura hesitated, searching for the right words. How could she explain something she barely understood herself? "It's not just about understanding," she said finally. "It's about connection. These animals aren't mindless killers. There's a social structure, communication, maybe even emotion. You should have seen the way the Alpha looked at me. It wasn't anger or fear, it was curiosity." Steve shook his head, unconvinced. "Even if you're right, what does it matter? We're here to study the ecosystem, not form bonds with the wildlife. Besides, these are apex predators. Getting too close is dangerous." Who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I saw it too," he said firmly. "Whatever happened out there, those Cubs weren't acting purely on instinct either. They responded to her because she treated them like equals, not threats." The room fell quiet as everyone turned to look at him. Rarely spoke during meetings, preferring to stay in the background. But this time, his tone carried a note of authority that demanded attention. "I'm not saying we should start making friends with every predator we find," he continued. "But we can't ignore what Laura did. She earned their trust without using force or weapons. That means something." Laura nodded gratefully, glad to have someone on her side. Still, not everyone was convinced. A woman named Rachel raised her hand, her expression thoughtful but wary. "Even if they are intelligent, how do we know they won't turn on us later? Apex predators are unpredictable. One moment they might seem calm, and the next they could tear us apart." Laura sighed, knowing Rachel had a point. Trusting these creatures came with risks, and she couldn't deny that. But she also believed that treating them with respect was the only way to truly understand them. "We don't have to get closer than necessary," she said carefully. "But we need to rethink our approach. If we keep seeing them as nothing more than animals to be studied, we'll miss the bigger picture." The debate went on for hours, with opinions divided down the middle. Some argued that capturing one of the cubs for closer observation was the best course of action, while others sided with Laura, insisting that such interference would only harm the delicate balance she had witnessed. As the discussion dragged on, Laura found herself growing increasingly frustrated. She understood the scientific value of studying the creatures up close, but she couldn't shake the image of the alpha's piercing gaze, or the realization that it could have killed her instantly if it chose to. Finally, the team leader, a man named, called for a break. "Let's table this conversation for now," he said, rubbing his temples. "We'll reconvene tomorrow and decide on a plan. In the meantime, everyone needs to stay safe. No wandering off alone, especially near areas where predators have been spotted." As the meeting ended, Laura lingered behind, her thoughts swirling. She appreciated its caution, but she couldn't help feeling that the team was missing the point. This wasn't just about collecting data or advancing human knowledge. It was about coexistence, about finding a way to live alongside these creatures without disrupting their world. Approached her as the others filed out of the tent. "You okay?" he asked, his voice gentle. Laura nodded, though her expression was troubled. "I just wish they'd listen," she admitted. "I know it sounds crazy, but I feel like we're standing on the edge of something important, something that could change how we see ourselves, not just as scientists but as part of something bigger." Smiled faintly. "They'll come around," he said. "Give them time. Not everyone reacts well to change, especially when it challenges what they believe." Laura sighed, knowing he was right. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. The longer they debated, the more likely it was that someone would push for drastic measures, measures that could destroy the fragile bond she had formed with the predators. Later that evening, Laura sat outside her tent, staring up at the twin suns as they dipped below the horizon. The sky was painted in hues of orange and purple, casting long shadows across the camp. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine what life might be like if humans could truly connect with these creatures, if they could learn to live together in harmony instead of fear. But reality soon intruded on her thoughts. Across the camp, voices rose as the team continued to argue over what to do next. Laura closed her eyes, wishing she could shut out the noise and focus on the beauty of the alien world around her. Somewhere out there, the alpha predator and its cubs were moving through the forest, their lives untouched by the chaos of human debate. As night fell, Laura made a decision. She wouldn't let fear or doubt dictate her actions. Whatever happened next, she would stand by what she believed in, even if it meant going against the rest of the team. Because deep down, she knew that the connection she had formed with the predators was worth protecting, and she was willing to fight for it, no matter the cost. Days passed, and the debate among the research team showed no signs of ending. The camp was tense, with everyone divided over what to do about the predators. Some argued for capturing one of the cubs, believing it would provide invaluable insights into their behavior and intelligence. Others, like Laura, insisted that such an action would be a betrayal of the trust she had worked so hard to build. The disagreement hung heavy in the air, making even simple tasks feel strained. Laura tried to stay focused on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to the forest. She couldn't stop thinking about the cubs or the alpha predator. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw its golden gaze, piercing yet somehow calm. It wasn't anger or aggression she had sensed from the creature. It was something else entirely, something that felt almost human. One morning, unable to resist the pull any longer, Laura decided to return to the spot where she had first encountered the cubs. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, knowing they would try to stop her. Instead, she slipped away quietly before dawn, armed only with her sample kit and a small recording device. Noticed her leaving but chose not to follow, trusting her judgment despite his own worries. The walk through the forest was familiar yet different this time. The air seemed heavier, charged with anticipation. Laura's footsteps were soft against the damp ground, her senses alert for any sign of movement. As she approached the rocky outcrop where the cubs had been fighting, her heart began to race. Would they be there? Would they remember her? She didn't have to wait long for an answer. The alpha predator emerged from the shadows of the trees, its massive frame silhouetted against the pale light of the twin suns. Laura froze, her breath catching in her throat. This time she was alone, no to watch her back, no team to argue over what should happen next. Just her and the alpha, standing face to face in the quiet of the forest. The creature studied her silently, its golden eyes locking onto hers. For a moment everything was still. Then slowly the alpha lowered itself slightly, bowing its head just as it had done before. Laura exhaled, realizing it recognized her. Whatever bond she had formed during their last encounter hadn't faded, it had grown stronger. Beside the alpha, the two cubs appeared, noticeably larger than before. Their sleek bodies shimmered in the sunlight and their movements were confident, filled with the energy of youth. The alpha let out a low rumble, nudging the cubs forward. They hesitated at first, glancing back at the alpha as if seeking reassurance. Then, encouraged by its steady presence, they stepped closer to Laura. Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she knelt slowly, keeping her movements deliberate and calm. The cubs sniffed her hands cautiously, their warm breath brushing against her skin. One of them nudged her gently, its scaled body pressing against her side. The other followed suit, curling around her legs as if claiming her as part of their group. Laura smiled softly, her heart swelling with emotion. For several long moments she stayed like that, surrounded by the creatures she had once feared. But now fear was replaced by something else, a deep sense of connection, of belonging. These animals weren't mindless beasts driven solely by instinct. They were intelligent, social beings capable of forming bonds across species. And somehow, Laura had earned their trust. When she finally returned to camp later that day, Laura knew exactly what she needed to do. She gathered the team once more, determined to make them understand. "I went back," she began, her voice firm but gentle. "And I saw them again, the alpha and the cubs. They remembered me. They trusted me." Her words were met with silence at first, the weight of her statement sinking in. Then Steve spoke up, his tone skeptical but curious. "What are you saying, Laura? That we should just leave them alone?" "Yes," Laura replied without hesitation. "Capturing one of them would destroy everything we've learned. It's not just about data or observations anymore, it's about respect, about coexistence. If we interfere, we risk losing the trust we've built. And once that's gone, it might never come back." Rachel frowned, clearly conflicted. "But how can we be sure they won't turn on us later? What happens when our curiosity pushes them too far?" Laura hesitated, knowing Rachel had a valid point. Trust was fragile, especially when it came to apex predators. But she also believed that treating these creatures with dignity was the only way forward. "We don't have all the answers," she admitted. "But we owe it to them and to ourselves to try, to find a way to live alongside them without causing harm." Nodded in agreement, stepping forward to support her. "She's right," he said. What Laura did out there was incredible, not because she faced down predators, but because she showed them kindness, respect. If we take that away, we're no better than the machines we send to study them. The room fell silent as the team absorbed his words. Slowly, one by one, they began to nod. Even Steve, who had been the most vocal advocate for capturing a cub, seemed to soften. "All right," he said finally. "If you believe this is the right thing to do, then I'll support you. But we need to document everything, every interaction, every observation. If we're going to leave them alone, we need to make sure we learn as much as we can while we're here." Laura smiled, relief washing over her. "Thank you," she said simply. "That's all I ask." Over the next few days, the team shifted their focus. Instead of planning captures or experiments, they worked together to observe the predators from a distance, using drones and cameras to gather data without disturbing their natural behavior. Laura spent hours outside the camp, watching the cubs play and interact under the watchful eye of the alpha. Each day brought new discoveries, new moments of connection that deepened her understanding of these remarkable creatures. As the weeks passed, Laura began to notice subtle changes in the predators' behavior. They seemed more comfortable around humans, less wary of the strange machines hovering above them. The alpha, in particular, appeared to recognize Laura whenever she approached, often guiding the cubs toward her as if introducing them to a trusted friend. It wasn't always easy. There were moments of tension, times when the team questioned whether they were doing enough or too much. But through it all, Laura remained steadfast in her belief that coexistence was possible. And slowly, the rest of the team began to see what she had known all along, that these creatures weren't just subjects to be studied. They were partners in a shared journey, teaching humanity as much as they were being taught. By the time the shuttle arrived to take the team home, Laura felt a bittersweet mix of emotions. She was proud of what they had accomplished, grateful for the connections they had forged. But she also knew that leaving this world behind would leave a void in her heart, one that might never fully heal. As the shuttle lifted off, Laura gazed out the window, catching one last glimpse of the forest below. Somewhere out there, the alpha watched her go, its golden eyes reflecting both wisdom and gratitude. And Laura knew deep down that she had made the right choice. For herself, for the team, and for the future of humanity's relationship with the unknown. The shuttle ride back to Earth was quiet, the hum of the engines filling the silence as the research team reflected on their time on the alien planet. Laura sat by the window, her gaze fixed on the stars outside. Her mind replayed every moment she had spent with the predators, the cubs' playful nudges, the alpha's piercing gaze, and the trust that had grown between them. It felt surreal, almost dreamlike, as if those experiences belonged to another life. For the rest of the team, the mission was over. They had collected data, observed behaviors, and debated theories. But for Laura, it wasn't just about science or discovery, it was personal. She had formed a bond with creatures from another world, one that transcended language, species, and fear. And now, leaving them behind felt like saying goodbye to old friends. When the shuttle finally landed on Earth, the team was greeted by colleagues eager to hear about their findings. Reporters crowded around, asking questions about the alien ecosystem and the predators Laura had encountered. But when they pressed her for details, Laura found herself struggling to explain. How could she put into words the connection she had felt? The way the alpha had looked at her, not as prey, but as an equal. Instead of focusing on the predators themselves, she spoke about coexistence, about finding ways to live alongside other beings without causing harm. "These creatures aren't just animals," she told the crowd, her voice calm but passionate. "They're intelligent, social, and capable of forming bonds. If we want to understand them, we need to approach them with respect, not fear." Her words resonated with some, but others dismissed her claims as overly sentimental. Critics argued that Laura's emotional attachment had clouded her judgment, that she was letting feelings get in the way of objective science. But Laura didn't care. She knew what she had experienced, and she refused to let skepticism diminish its significance. Back at the research facility, the team worked tirelessly to analyze the data they had gathered. Videos of the Cubs playing, recordings of the Alpha's calls, and notes on their interactions filled the lab. Laura poured herself into the work, determined to ensure that their findings would be shared responsibly. She wrote reports, gave presentations, and collaborated with experts in fields ranging from biology to anthropology. Slowly, her story began to gain traction. One day, while reviewing footage of the alpha predator, Laura noticed something she hadn't seen before. In one clip, the creature stood atop a rocky ledge, its golden eyes scanning the horizon. Its posture was regal, commanding, a clear sign of leadership. But then, as the camera zoomed in, Laura saw something remarkable. Around its neck hung a faint mark, almost like a scar. It was subtle, easy to miss, but unmistakably deliberate. A symbol, perhaps, left by another member of its kind, or maybe even by humans who had visited the planet long ago. Laura's heart raced as she showed the footage to. "Do you see this?" she asked, pointing to the screen. "What if it's proof that these creatures have interacted with others before us? What if they've been communicating with beings beyond their own species for years?" Leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "It's possible," he admitted. "But how do we prove it? Without more evidence, it's just speculation." Laura nodded, knowing he was right. Still, the discovery reignited her determination. If the predators had communicated with outsiders before, then there might be a way to deepen humanity's understanding of them, not through force or capture, but through mutual exchange. She began drafting proposals for future missions, outlining plans to return to the planet with new tools and methods designed to foster communication rather than observation. In the months that followed, Laura became a vocal advocate for ethical exploration. She spoke at conferences, wrote articles, and collaborated with organizations dedicated to preserving alien ecosystems. Her message was simple. Humanity had a responsibility to treat other worlds and their inhabitants with care and respect. It wasn't enough to study, they needed to listen. Despite her efforts, not everyone agreed with her vision. Some scientists argued that prioritizing ethics over advancement would slow progress. Others accused her of romanticizing the predators, of seeing intelligence where none truly existed. But Laura remained undeterred. She knew the truth of what she had witnessed, and she trusted that others would come to understand it in time. One evening, as she sat alone in her apartment, Laura received an unexpected message. It was from who had taken a position with a new research initiative focused on interstellar diplomacy. "We're planning another trip," he wrote, "to your planet. Thought you might want to join us." Laura stared at the screen, her heart pounding. She hadn't expected this, hadn't dared to hope. But now, faced with the possibility of returning, she felt a surge of excitement mixed with apprehension. Could she go back? Should she? After a long moment, she typed her response, "I'll be there." Months later, Laura stood once again on the alien planet, the familiar scent of the forest filling her lungs. This time, she wasn't alone. A small team of researchers accompanied her, all committed to her vision of respectful exploration. Together, they set up camp near the rocky outcrop where she had first met the cubs. It didn't take long for the predators to find them. One morning, as the suns rose over the horizon, the alpha appeared at the edge of the clearing. Its golden eyes locked onto Laura immediately, recognition flashing in its gaze. Behind it, the cubs bounded forward, their sleek bodies gleaming in the light. They nuzzled against her legs, their warm breath brushing against her skin. Laura knelt slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. She had returned, and so had they. The bond she had feared losing was still intact, stronger than ever. As the alpha stepped closer, it let out a low rumble, its massive frame towering over her. For a moment, everything was still. Then, gently, it lowered its head, bowing slightly as it had done before. Laura reached out, placing her hand on its scaled forehead. The gesture was simple, yet profound, a promise kept, a connection renewed. Around her, the team watched in awe, their cameras recording every moment. But Laura didn't need proof or validation. She already knew what mattered most. This wasn't just about science or discovery. It was about trust, respect, and the fragile beauty of coexistence. And as the alpha turned away, leading its cubs back into the forest, Laura felt a deep sense of peace. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew she had made the right choice for herself, for the predators, and for the future of humanity's place in the universe.